Yeah, we were just watching me and Mike Mills Masao Ito, early '84, and whatever you want to say about him, one of the things that hurts him, again, a not very tall, somewhat stocky Japanese
Portly.
wrestler with long hair.
Yeah.
Kabuki was just there a couple years before that.
Yeah.
Kendo Nagasaki was just there the year before that. So, I mean, it
and
wasn't
Masayo
special.
Ito had no gimmick that was
Yeah.
cool Kabuki was a better worker than Masayo Ito, and Kabuki had a better gimmick. So they'd already seen a better example before he came along.
It does make me wonder if the people in Florida, not that I don't like Kabuki and Gary Hart and Gary Hart's promos about Kabuki, but the people in Florida didn't get Kabuki, they got Kendo Nagasaki.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the people who got the Rock and Roll Express first as opposed to the Fabulous ones. They got Kendo Nagasaki, not Kabuki. Kendo Nagasaki was really good. That's the biggest problem. If you saw Kabuki first, you couldn't really take him seriously.
Well, and the same thing with the Rock and Roll and the Fantastics as relates to Fabs and Rock and Roll. Whoever you saw first naturally registered as the better team because they were in the same genre, the MTV style music videos, the sexy guys for the girls, etc. They were different in that the Fabs, Stan and Steve, had the matches with the Sheepherders and the Moondogs and the fights, and they were the macho Harley Davidson riding fucking guys. They're still in the Speedos in questionable poses with today's eyes, but the girls loved it because they were macho guys. The Rock and Roll were the teeny bopper version. They were for the younger girls. They had the bandanas, and they got the shit kicked out of them more because they weren't big bodybuilders. They were fluffy young boys that your grandmother would love too.
Well, you know what, too? The Fabulous ones looked like the actors or models that would get hired to be in a music video. The Rock and Roll Express looked more like the band.
It looked like the band that would, exactly, because the rock stars didn't have Steve and Stan's bodies. And then the Fantastics kind of merged both of those things, whereas Bobby and Tommy were smaller than Stan and Steve, and they were cuter, and they were younger, and they didn't have the rough look to them. So they appealed more as teeny boppers like the Rock and Roll, even though it was a Fabulous one's, homage, the Fantastics. But the Fantastics got over in Dallas better than the Rock and Roll ever did because they were first. They were the first time that the people saw the tuxedos and the ZZ Top music and the strut and and then two baby faces that would sell their ass off and make a big comeback. So when the Rock and Roll went, they went in for shots. They never went to stay. But the reaction wasn't like, oh my God, because those women were busy tearing Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers' clothes off on the way to the ring and pulling it. I watched Bobby Fulton try to get on the apron of the ring 5 different times one night, and the girls were pulling him down. And he had to grab the ropes, and Tommy had to give him a hand up to get away from the women. It was insane. But it was what you saw first. The same thing happened with the Fabs in Tennessee because they hadn't seen anything like it. When the Rock and Roll came along, they were just for the spot shows, the B team. But then the Rock and Roll show up in Louisiana where their baby faces before had been, Hacksaw Duggan and guys like that, great athletes, but not exactly teeny bopper idols. And the girls came in droves. So it depended on what you saw first and if they were any good at all. Then, of course, there were so many Rock and Roll Express ripoffs, the Rock and Roll RPMs and
Midnight Rockers are the most notorious.
The Midnight Rocker, well, at least they made it. Like poor Mike Davis and Tommy Lane, the Rock and Roll RPMs. I mean, Mike Davis was a good worker, but god damn, he looked the last thing like a rock and roll star with his snaggle teeth and, the physique. Well, I mean, seriously.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
And then, I mean, even when Bobby Eaton died laughing about this. Nick tried to run spot shows in the mid 80s in Tennessee. Nick Goulas did, Bobby's old boss. And he got Tommy Hagee, who was a local guy down there, and somebody else I can't remember, to be the Stop and Go Express. And I guess in his mind, it was like, well, they're quick and they're sudden, they stop and they go or whatever. But there was a stop and go convenience store chain. And Bobby Eaton used to fucking die laughing. Like, what are they going to come in and bring us some fucking hot dogs and everything? The Stop and Go Express? What the fuck's going on? So, so that was that.